Hey everyone, this is Bearwire, and I'm making my third and final video in this Deep Stack series. Finally, I am playing someone who I would believe to be competent, someone who's a regular at these games. I've seen this player at pretty much the 100s through the 300s. I don't think I've ever seen him higher or lower. So he pretty much plays the same games as I do. But I don't know a lot about his skill level. I just know I'm pretty sure he sat me. My shark scope, as you guys know, is not that great looking, so he might have just thought I was a fish sitting at 300s. He doesn't sit me anymore, so I assume that he has figured out otherwise. But at the time, I didn't know a lot about him or how he was going to perceive me. But hopefully throughout the match, I can pick up some things on what he's thinking about my gameplay, what his tendencies are, and where he sort of makes his default decisions. So I'm just going to go ahead and start it. This is the first hand. We defend King Queen against a 3x. Interesting that he doesn't c-bet on a good board. It's a good spot to c-bet, even though he doesn't have reads on me. So when he makes a delayed bet, I just assume that he's going for thin value with like an underpair or ace high or something like that, and I just fold. I really think that if he had a bluff, there's no reason not to bet that flop. So I just gave up on the hand. So at this point, I mean, I've played more since the time that I played this, and I'm just going to go ahead. Knowing that he's a reg, my style sort of at deep stacks is to take a little more aggressive approach, because these are the type of hands that I'd like to be 3-betting if he turns out to be sort of a weak-tight regular. I'm not crazy about c-betting here, to be honest. I mean, this is a board that connects pretty well with his range, and we really don't have that much equity in the pot. I mean, the 7 of clubs is nice for giving us some backdoor opportunities, but I mean, against like a standard defending range, he's going to have like a gut shot or a pair of queens or a pair of aces really, really often here. Some of the worst hands he can have here are like 5s or 8s. Or like 9-10, and all these hands have good equity against us, and might not even fold. So I'm not sure why I c-bet here. I mean, it is early, and I'd like to know how he reacts to a c-bet, because if he starts folding too often, I'm going to start 3-betting a lot more. But to be honest, I think this is a losing c-bet. You'll notice my sizing is a little bit on the big side as far as pre-flop and on the flop. That's really just to set up stacks. My default sizing is going to be around this so that I can threaten all 150 big blinds by the time we get to the river. And I don't want to be messing with my bet sizing. See, since this is the first hand, this is sort of my chance to establish what my bet sizing will be. So even though I have air here and I would love to bet smaller right now, I need to, since he's perceptive and he's a regular, I need to make sure that, you know, the next time I 3-bet, if I have a value hand, I don't mess with the sizing for no conceivable reason and just sort of telegraph the fact that my hand is stronger. So I am going to make this my standard sizing for the future. But to be honest, I think I would have just rathered to check fold here, and maybe start attacking the turn if he checks back the flop. I'm really not crazy about c-betting here. I don't think I get many folds at all. Obviously, one of the worst turn cards. Without reads, there's just no reason to bet here. I'm definitely done with the hand. There are very few people I would bluff this card against, and mostly those are the guys who are really nitty enough to fold like King Queen here on the turn, because of how bad of a bluff card it is. But I mean, like I said, I know nothing about him, so I really shouldn't be making any wild plays. Pre-flop, I would not consider to be wild, just because, you know, it's pretty standard for regs to open 100% or close to it. So 3-bet bluffing at 100 to 150 big blinds is perfectly fine. I check back the flop here, which is sort of non-standard. I mean, it's kind of close. See, I would expect him to defend every ace. So what that means is that my hand is not strong enough to bet for 3 streets of value. Because combination-wise, he's going to have so many aces in his range here, and he's not going to check raise a lot of them, because like I explained in my other videos, a competent regular at over 100 big blinds realizes that, check raising like ace-5 here without a specific reason to do so puts you in a lot of really difficult situations, so hands like that become a really standard check calling hand. So for that reason, if I decided to c-bet here with king-jack and then continue to bet across multiple streets, there's a pretty good chance that by the time we got to the river, he would have like almost exclusively better hands in his range. So that's a pretty big problem. For that reason, I think it's a decent hand to check back. What it does is it sort of gives me a good bluff catcher for... basically, my plan would be to call a turn and river lead on the vast majority of cards, and that way, my hand sort of looks, I have a pretty strong hand compared to what my check looks like. I mean, it kind of looks like I have pocket fives, or like 7-6, for example. The turn card isn't great for me here, but I mean, the general idea is that, if the turn came like the 9 of diamonds or something, he sort of has the green light to just go ahead and bluff 2 streets, because in that situation I never have a flush, and I really rarely have better than 1 pair, so it's just like an awesome opportunity for him to bluff at me. So hands like this will sort of, this is what I would call down with. This is what, these are the type of hands that are too weak to 3-barrel, but strong enough to call 2 barrels, so it's sort of a good part of your range to check for that reason. All of this, though, is sort of assuming that he's an aggressive regular. But at the same time, like checking the flop and getting to showdown early sort of helps me establish his image. Not establish his image, but learn what his... I'm wording this terribly. Getting to showdown more often early against a regular is going to give me a better idea of like how he plays, and it'll let me establish my perception of him. It'll give me a good idea of how he plays. So if there's like a close decision here on the flop between c-betting for value or checking back and sort of bluff catching, I'm going to choose the bluff catching option because it gets me to showdown more often. So it gives me a chance to learn more about him while being very similar in EV to c-betting. So on the turn here, even though it sort of looks like I have a 7 here, I think it's a good spot to bet because I think he would lead with the majority of better hands, but he can certainly check call with something like pocket 8s or pocket 5s, or even something like queen jack or queen 10. And on the river here, I mean, I'm not really expecting. Sorry, I missed that. I'll let the replayer come up. I wasn't really expecting. Where the hell did it go? Whatever, I missed it. Sorry. But on the 7 river, we have a full house, and I don't think he ever has. Well, I shouldn't say ever, but I think he really rarely has an ace. So I don't think we're really ever beat. But at the same time, I mean, he can have a king pretty easily. So I don't want to bet too big, because it looks like once I check the flop and then bet the turn, it looks like I have showdown value. Because I mean, most of my bluffs would bet the flop. That's sort of obvious. So it does look like I have a good hand. So I sort of have to... It's in my best interest to bet small and give him a good price so that if he has pocket 5s... I mean, obviously he has a full house, but he's not like a drooler. He understands that, pocket 5s is a weak hand against my range there. So I sort of need to give him good odds to make him consider calling there, in my opinion. Until... maybe later if I establish an image that I'm capable of bluffing there, then I can start betting larger. But I think for the time being, I should really, I might have even bet too big. I might have rather gone like 135, around half pot. It's sort of tricky, but generally when it's difficult for you to be bluffing, it's in your overall, it's just in your best interest to bet small, to sort of convince him that he has the right pot odds to call, because your rare bluffs compensate for the fact that you have a wide value range when you give him a good enough price. So that's sort of the. I mean, I would hate betting larger than 2/3 pot there, because I think it's just way too big, and I think I'll only get looked up by chops and the occasional better full house. Really rare though. I almost never expect a better full house just because he didn't bet the turn. It doesn't really make sense. Also, he would probably check raise the river with it, because it looks like I have a king or worse. So well, maybe he doesn't, because I could have quads, but I don't know. He would have to be kind of nitty not to check raise an ace on the river, I think. So here on the flop, it's another sort of close decision, I think. But because on this flop, God, I missed it again. I'm gonna keep my hand on the mouse for the rest of this video so I don't miss that. But on 6-3 deuce, I expect a lot of ace highs to peel, and that's pretty important. Because, like, if I'm not really concerned about getting check raised, then there's no real issue with going for thin value on the flop. See, earlier on ace king 7, there's no, like, naked overcards possible. There's no, there's not a lot of, like, I guess I should say, like, weak hands that will call the flop bet, but won't put in money on later streets. Whereas on 6-3 deuce, I think there's a lot of hands like that. I think that like king high with a spade or ace high in general are just rarely going to fold, and they're also not really going to check raise me. So I think I get peeled too often on that flop, and for that reason I think it's better to bet for thin value. It's sort of just a matter of like being able to get value on early streets, because my range has so many bluffs, so he can peel with ace high and things like that. But if I try and like check back and then bet on later streets, there's a variety of ways the board could run out that will convince him to fold those hands. So I want to get some money in on the flop while my hand is usually best, and he can peel with a lot of like pretty low equity hands like ace 9 or something like that. So without any this is interesting. This is the second time that he's checked back a pretty good board to c-bet, and I'm not sure what to make of it because I haven't gotten to showdown. I haven't gotten to showdown against him in that situation yet. So hopefully, I think in this situation, I think it's kind of close between betting and checking, and I can't actually remember what I chose. I guess I decided to try and get to showdown again. The issue is that the last time I checked twice with king-queen, he blew me off of it. So I think in the last situation he had like a medium pair that he went for a delayed value bet with. But this time I think he's just trying to get to showdown with like king-high or something. And he bets the river anyways. See, yeah. I mean, I don't hate my decision to try and show down here because it gives me the chance to see his hand. Even though it's usually king high and I'm usually beat, I think sort of confirming my reads is pretty valuable there. But unfortunately, he bet again on the river with what I would imagine is like king 3 or perhaps a really small pair that finally felt comfortable value betting, like pocket 4s or pocket 2s. And he says, I can tell this is going to be a long game. I imagine that was him. Yeah, I think this was the first and possibly only time that we've played. So I from that comment, I think he like just realized. My impression was that he just realized. Maybe he's not totally convinced. I guess I'll talk about this flop play before I start talking about our chat. This is very similar to what I was talking about with the king jack hand. we have a pretty weak pair on a board that hits his range pretty well. He's been defending kind of a lot. I mean, it's only been 12 hands, so it's not useful to look at the stat, but he's been defending mostly, and not 3-betting, so certainly he can have a bunch of hands that have nothing here, like King 6 offsuit or whatever, but my concern is that there's a lot of hands that connect well with this board that will either not fold or check raise me, and both of those situations are pretty bad for like a weak pair with no redraws or anything. So I guess the idea, yeah, I mean, like, you could make the case that you c-bet the flop to sort of protect your equity against those hands, but the issue is that they're not going to fold and your equity isn't very good anyways. Not to mention the fact that you're also putting in money against hands like pocket fives or 8-7, which will potentially just check down, which is nice because it saves us a lot of money when he has those hands. So basically my goal here is just to get to showdown with a weak pair and hopefully beat something like king high, pocket twos or 3-4 or something, but I just don't think there's any value in betting, and I don't think our equity is good enough. That was sort of a... Yeah, see, this is why I shouldn't chat in-game, because I think I get caught up in trying to make clever jokes in the chat box, and I make sort of bad calls. He has been leading a lot. Actually, no, he check called earlier on ace king 7-7. Yeah, I think this is a pretty bad call. I think that when we're ahead, he's going to have like 2 overs and a gut shot at the least. And I think obviously when we're behind, we have 5 outs at the most. I think that's a really optimistic call, and I think I should just be folding. I don't think he's leading anything worse for value. The fact that he check called earlier on ace king 7-7 makes me think that, like, with a hand like 8-7 here, he would choose to check call rather than to lead. So I think that the majority of his value hands have me like crushed, not just beat. Like, I think he's leading like I just don't think he's leading anything really marginal here. So I think that he's going to have like big draws, and I think he's going to have like value hands that have me drawing to 2 outs or something. So sometimes 5 outs if he has like ace 5. But regardless, I just don't like my call there. I think I should just fold. I also run the risk of facing a river bet, which would really suck. But he ended up having a big draw, which is one of my best case scenarios is that he had a big draw there. So, and the thing to notice there is that the fact that he had a 3 was good for me because it means that he wasn't going to bet the river when he misses. But on the 10 river, if I was facing another bet, I would be pretty clueless as to what to do, and I would probably end up clicking call because everything missed. But again, that just sort of goes to show the fact that my call on the turn is really speculative, because I should also expect a river bet from the majority of the range that I'm beating, which means that I'm not only paying 80 on the turn, I'm also paying like 210 on the river or whatever, which makes my pot odds even worse than they seem to be on the turn. I think that's, what is that, like leverage or something from Skolansky's Beginner's Hold'em for, I don't know, whatever it was. It's true. I really think I misplayed that hand. So yeah, I've been checking a lot of flops, but again, this is a situation where I think I have a hand that I can show down pretty comfortably, and he hasn't. I don't think he's like horribly aggressive, so I'm just going to continually try and get to showdown with these sort of marginal hands, especially in a spot where he can have a lot of aces. So there he has 10-7, and he doesn't lead the turn or the river with it, which is definitely like worthwhile information, and sort of makes me feel a little bit better about how I've been playing these other hands. So now we are at about 90 big blinds effective. Against some people, I would start reducing the size of my open, but he he's shown to be someone who mostly calls in the big blind and doesn't 3-bet so far. So as long as he keeps up that pattern, I'm just going to continue 3xing him with pretty much every hand. Although since he's somewhat competent post flop, I'm probably still going to fold hands like like 9-3 offsuit. But I'll open a pretty high percentage against him for those reasons. I think flop is an obvious c-bet. We don't really have any showdown value, and we have a pretty good draw. So I've already 3-bet him once, and we're getting a little on the shallow side. So I think king queen suited is a pretty standard 3-bet for value. Excuse me. Obviously, we love this flop. And the plan is really just like, how do I size a c-bet so that I can still get stacks in, but then I'm not betting huge. Here, I think that 255 is probably smaller than most of you might c-bet in this situation. Just because I 3-bet to 270. It seems kind of strange to bet small, but the reason I bet small here, like I was saying earlier, is that when I have earlier when I had 4-8 of clubs, and I 3-bet, we were at 150 big blinds. So I had to make it, more than pot pre-flop, and I also had to make it more than half pot on the flop, because otherwise I can't really threaten his stack. It makes it awkward to try and get stacks in if I'm not betting a little bit bigger. But now that we're down at about 90 big blinds, I can really get away with betting smaller. We're still going for 3 streets. We're not trying to pile in the money by the time the turn gets here. But what I can do here is now, I can have this price, which gives me a good price on my bluffs. I mean, keep in mind he's been folding. My third stat on the second line, 67%. That means he's folded to 2 out of 3 c-bets. So he's not. I mean, it's a small sample. But my read on most regulars is that they're a little on the tight side and they're not really too fancy. So he's going to fold a lot to c-bets. Or at least more than he should be. So against him, I think it's going to be in my best interest to make pretty small c-bets overall, because it gives me a great price on my bluffs, and bluffing is what I'll be doing the majority of the time. And at the same time, I don't lose anything when I have king-queen, because, on the turn the pot's going to be over 1,000 if he calls. It's really easy to just bet like 550 or 600 on the turn, and I'll have underpot left for the river bet. So he does call, and I get a pretty interesting turn in my opinion. This is a spot where against a lot of people I would check, and I think I do check against him, so I'll explain that for a little bit. First of all, like I was saying earlier, on ace king 7-7 or whatever, this is a bad turn card to bluff. The reason being is that it basically it makes it harder for me to have a value hand. So it makes it more difficult, I guess, mathematically for me to convince him that I have something. Obviously, I'm not saying that like my goal on the flop was to represent, trip threes or something, or a set of threes, but the idea is that, if an ace came on the turn or a king came on the turn, that means that like some of my bluffs, like ace king or ace jack or king 10 or whatever, not that I would actually 3-bet king 10, but you get the idea. Those are cards that I can credibly represent. They expand my value range. But here on the 3 turn, now it's like, okay, well, if I bet here again, I'm representing, king, queen, ace, queen, kings, and aces. And that's basically it. So it's obvious that makes it a bad spot to bluff. So when I bet here, I think it looks pretty strong. And I think he can find a fold with hands like 5-6 suited, pocket fours, ace high, clubs. Clubs I think will probably fold, unless they're good, unless they're like nut clubs or something. Basically, well, I haven't even gotten to my second point. The second point is that I think that he can have floats. So if my idea is that he can float the flop with like Jack 10 or bad clubs, 6-4 suited, 7-6 suited. Those are all hands that might fold the turn. So against those hands, I don't want to bet unless I have like, I mean, we don't have a dynamic going. You know, there's not an aggressive dynamic that warrants me taking an aggressive line in a bad spot to bluff. If I had 6-7 here, I would bet again for that same reason, because he'll interpret it as a bad spot to bluff, and thus I'll get a lot of folds. But here with King-Queen, I think it's in my best interest to check, because he can bet his floats, he can bet his clubs, he can bet his 6-7, and he can value bet worse, which is also important, because I don't really run the risk of like him checking back something that would have stacked off if I bet the turn. If he has Queen 10 suited here, he's betting. Because it looks like I have, you know, nothing, or it looks like I have pocket 8s, or it looks like I have, you know, maybe I'm going to check raise all in with clubs or something to catch his floats. Regardless, I think it's just a really good spot to check because we don't have an aggressive dynamic. If there was like a different dynamic going where I've been, you know, wailing on him, bluffing all the time, and he's getting frustrated with me, then sure, I'll bet again. But as played, I think checking is best, just to let him go ahead and bet gut shots and floats and Queen X hands. And if he checks back, I would just assume he has marginal showdown value, and I would probably lead the river. Alright, so he does check back, and we actually get a really good river in my opinion. Once he checks back, and once this card comes, I think it's really clear that he very rarely has a queen, very rarely has air, and frequently likes his hand at showdown. So I think this is pretty... I actually think I could get away with betting a little bigger here, but I don't really want to... I don't know, maybe I just have... Maybe I'm just too convinced that like piling in a large bet is going to scare somebody. I don't really know how he would react to a bet of like 725 here, but I would imagine it looks a little bit bluffy, because, I mean, it's hard to represent something here. I'm basically trying to represent a queen that checked the turn for some reason, which is non-standard. I think like frequently he's going to have like a 5 or pocket 7s or ace high, and those are all hands that have to consider calling me here. You know, it can sort of appear like I'm just jumping on weakness because he checked the turn, and obviously when he checks the turn he never has a full house here. Or I shouldn't say never, but extremely rarely has a full house here. So for that reason, I think I prefer a bigger bet. I think I should bet like 725 or 750 here, because I'm really representing a narrow range, but at the same time I have a lot of air in my range. I'm not saying I have a lot of air that bets this river, but I'm saying getting to the river in this way, I usually have air. And he doesn't know how often I bluff, so it would be pretty bad on his part to like see that, you know, obviously I bet the flop, check the turn, I'm representing a hand that's giving up. And then I get the river and I make like this last desperation bluff or whatever. But even if that's not too convincing, like he doesn't know how often I'm going to bluff in this situation because he doesn't know me very well, just like I don't know him very well. But I can still make a pretty safe assumption that he usually has showdown value here, and I usually have air getting to the river. So when I bet the river, and my range before I bet was primarily air, I think it's really bad for him to just like automatically fold because I made a big bet. I think he should really consider calling me with something like 5-6 or pocket 7s or whatever. So I don't really like my bet size here. I think I'm missing some value. But I do think you should always lead here, because I think when I'm representing air, I don't think he bets thinly for value. I think he just takes his showdown with ace high, takes his showdown with a 5. He might bet things that are better than a 5, but I'm sort of concerned about... I should mention before I go on. Not only am I representing air when I check the turn, but I'm also representing marginal made hands. Something like pocket tens is something that I would definitely play this way, and something that he would expect me to play this way, in my opinion. So for that reason, when I bet sort of small here, not only does it look like I should say that when I lead the river, I could have a desperate bluff, but I could also have a thin value bet. So when my range is like bluffs and thin value bets, betting small makes it more likely, in my opinion, that I have a thin value bet and less likely that I have a bluff. At least that's how I would think he'll perceive my bets, and I think that's how most people perceive bet sizing, is that if I bet larger here, it looks more like I'm trying to bluff, and if I bet smaller here, it looks more like I have pocket tens trying to get called by ace high. So if I that's another reason that I should bet big here, is that it sort of removes thin value bets from my perceived range and makes it a much easier call for him with ace high. So with that all being said, that's the other reason that I don't like checking, because if he has a 5, he can still expect me to have something like 9s or 10s here. If, I'm kind of... I don't know. He doesn't really need to make that many assumptions to think that I can have 9s or 10s here. That's just... I think that's pretty normal. I think a lot of people would play 9s or 10s that way. So if I check, I think he checks back everything, unless he has a full house. And obviously, that doesn't really matter. So, by far, I think leading is the best play. And by far, I think I should be betting bigger. Fortunately, he found a call. I forget what it was with. Pocket 4s. And I think his call is really bad. Like, extremely, extremely bad. But that's cool. I'm glad that he made the call. So here, I think this is a really interesting spot. As you notice, and I pointed out right before I make this play, he hasn't c-bet yet at all. That's really strange. And that's cause for adjustments. The other thing, I mean, it's also sort of nice to shift gears on someone who just lost a big pot, because they're probably feeling sort of frustrated, so if you throw things at them that they haven't seen before while they're frustrated, they'll probably react terribly to it. But that's a completely other topic. The point here is that he hasn't c-bet in 20 hands. I mean, it's not actually 20 chances, it's probably like 3 or 4 chances, but regardless, if he's not c-betting, I want to start leading. Just in general, not necessarily with this hand and this board, but I just want to start leading against him. Leading is something that not enough people do, in my opinion, and it's really awesome, and it's really tough to play against if you're doing it well. And not a lot of people have played against people who lead, so like I said, they'll probably react poorly to it, because they won't really know what my range is. So, if I'm... First thing to note is that stacks are getting much shallower. We're at about 70 big blinds right now. Actually less, like 65. So it's at this point, even though he is a little bit nitty, I am extremely happy to get all in with this hand on this board, in pretty much whatever way it has to go down. Unless he, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, pretty much I'm getting stacks in here. So I think that leading is a really interesting way to play this board, because I can credibly represent a lot of draws. I can have some gut shots here. Leading is probably what I would do with something like Queen 8, perhaps 6-7 of clubs, or I don't know, Jack 7 or something like that. Those are pretty good candidates for leading, in my opinion. Because, I mean, there's a couple things I like to do when I'm leading. The first thing I like to do when I'm leading is I like to have a plan for a raise. because if he's going to raise, or rather, I think a lot of people raise leads too much because it's sort of like an instinct reaction from playing fish who lead too often. Against a fish, like the standard, ABC poker way to approach that is just to raise him like all day with like everything. So I think that when, like people who haven't played against regulars who lead, and I don't even know if he thinks I'm a regular, to be honest. Like, he might think I'm a huge fish right now. I've played 88% of my hands. I've opened every button, so I don't know, whatever. Even if he thinks that I'm a fish, this is a great hand to lead because I'm just going to get raised a lot, and that's awesome. But my general point is that I like to lead hands that can stand a raise, like top pair, and I also like to lead hands that can comfortably fold to a raise, like 6-7 of clubs. But at the same time, the reason I would lead something like 6-7 of clubs is that it has a variety of ways to improve on the turn for the times when he calls. Because if he calls, very frequently it just means that he has a marginal made hand. So if I'm leading as a bluff here, I want to be very careful to lead with something that I can be happy about double or triple barreling with. So against someone good, like I perceive him to be, I'm going to, if I was bluffing here, and definitely in this exact situation, if I was dealt 6-7, Queen 8, maybe like King 5 of clubs, maybe like, I don't know, Queen 7 of spades, I think these are great hands to lead. Because if I check and he c-bets, which he hasn't done yet, I assume his range is strong, and I can't continue against that strong range. But if I lead, it like totally opens up the door to me winning pots against hands that would have blown me off my hand. If he decides to make his first c-bet with a bluff here. Or it also opens me up to leading multiple streets with a hand like Queen 7 when the Jack comes on the turn, when the 8 of spades comes on the turn, when any spade comes on the turn, when I have King 5 of diamonds and a Queen comes on the turn. These are incredible spots to lead again. So if I pick hands that have a lot of good backdoor draws, a lot of good barreling cards, I'm going to have a really good situation to bluff on later streets when those cards come. If they don't come, I'll probably just be giving up. But anyways, that's a brief rundown of what I would be leading against a regular. And you'll notice, most importantly, that it's way, way different than what I would lead against a passive fish, like you saw in my last video if you watched it. I was leading all sorts of medium-strength pairs on extremely drawy boards, and that's because I'm just trying to get value out of draws. From a passive player. That's not how I expect him to play, so it completely changes the way that I lead. Also, the fact that he won't call down as light means that I'm going to be bluffing him way more often than I would bluff the fishy player. So like I said, I like to have a plan against a raise. And my plan here against a raise, because, first of all, he was sort of frustrated. At least I would imagine he's frustrated from losing the last pot. I mean, it was literally last hand. I don't know who doesn't get frustrated from losing that hand against a boat in a heads-up match. But anyways, I think that calling here it's an acceptable option, and at deeper stacks I would definitely call here. But like I said, we're starting to get shallow. So there's a couple things that happen when we start to get shallow. First of all, he'll raise thinner for value, so I think Jack 10 here becomes a raise in his shoes. Whereas if we were really deep, he would probably just call with Jack 10 because he wouldn't know what to do against a 3-bet. The other thing is that at shallow stacks, there's more merit in just protecting my hand. Because if he raises here with a straight draw with 2 overcards, if he raises here with, ace queen of spades, if he raises here with 7-8 or gut shots or really anything, those are hands that like when I flat call and then check to him on the turn, now he gets the option of like taking an extra free card, betting betting when he improves, and these are just all sorts of things that I don't really know how to best react to, especially being out of position. So I think 3-betting here is going to be the best play. And I also think that given stack sizes, the most convincing way to represent a bluff is to shove. Now, I know that I sort of cut off his options from rebluffing me or whatever, but I just don't really expect him to do it. I mean, he's generally a nitty regular from what I can tell. He's been pretty in line, and I've been pretty much the opposite. I've been really aggressive. I've been taking a lot of pots, or I've been trying to. I haven't succeeded that often, but as you can tell from just comparing our stats, I've been more aggressive by far. He's been more passive by far. So I think that I think that making it 675 here and expecting him to rebluff jam is just hugely optimistic. And I also think that given stack sizes, if he has Queen Jack or King Jack here and I jam, he has to consider calling. Because of the fact that not only does he have a good draw with 2 streets left, but he also could have the best hand. Because I could potentially, in his eyes, be bluffing here with 7-8, Jack 8, Queen Jack, etc. etc. So, so I do end up jamming here. It's not even really a huge overbet. I mean, it's a pretty big overbet, but I don't think there's much. I mean, I think he calls anything that he raised for value, which is good, because I'm ahead of his value range, I think. And like I said, he has to consider calling with these hands. I actually think his call is fine against my range, by the way. So now that we're at about 65 blinds, I decided to start opening 2.5, which I think is pretty standard. Even though he hasn't 3-bet yet, he's not a fish. So I don't think I can expect him to continue flatting out of position with too many hands. So here I debate furiously between calling and folding. His sizing is what made me fold, to be honest. His sizing is really big compared to the other bets he's been making. And like I've been hinting at, ace-high boards against him are kind of concerning to me because he can have a lot of aces in his range. And against someone who doesn't 3-bet, he has even more aces in his range because he might not 3-bet ace-jack or ace-queen or ace-10 suited or whatever. My other concern, as I've stated in past hands like this, is that I might be facing a river bet. But yeah, I mean, I check the flop because I don't think I get much value from worse. It's hard for him to have a draw, and it's easy for him to have a better hand considering what I expect him to defend pre-flop. And if he checked the turn again, I would probably bet for value. But I really think, for the way this match has been going, and on top of the fact that he just won a big pot, I mean, the dynamic is totally different when he just won a big pot, because I think it really, it gives him some complacency. He feels a little bit better about himself. And I think that he's going to be way less likely to, run a big bluff. I think he's going to be way more likely to just make that bet for value. And be comfortable value betting because I've been checking back so often. Even with King Queen or something, I think he would make a correct 2-street value bet there. So yeah, I mean, I certainly think that it's close, but like I've said, my reads against him so far are that he's going to be pretty strong there, and the bet sizing sort of did it in for me. I think if he had led 90 or 100 there, I would have ended up calling. So I don't know why I'm in raised, but that's fine. I would imagine 2.5 blinds is better against him, just because he's not 3-betting. So here I have another marginal decision with another middle pair hand on another ace-high board. This time, I decide to c-bet, and I have no idea. I mean, it's like, honestly, that, well, having a queen kicker is nice because I beat a lot of other sevens. And he's not very aggressive, so I don't think he's going to check raise me with a lot of aces on this board. When the ace turns, I'm pretty comfortable with my hand, and I think it becomes at least a two-street hand, and plausibly a three-street hand. I actually remember asking someone about this river bet. I think it was MJW who I asked about this river bet, because I'm really skeptical about whether or not it's too thin. For a couple reasons. One, like I've said, I don't think he check raises me with an ace on the flop. And I think it's plausible that on the turn he check calls again, because I don't think we have a dynamic that warrants me value betting particularly thin. So I don't think he necessarily expects me to bet the turn with, like, 7-6 or pocket fives or something. And I don't think that he expects me to, like, bet call queens on the turn. So I think there's certainly merit in him check calling the turn with like ace 5 or ace 8. Excuse me. But I'm sure that in game I justified this mentally with some sort of timing tell, and I didn't really notice it on the second watch through, but I certainly think that at least my impression on the turn decision is that, like, there's probably at least some sort of thought process that goes through his mind when deciding between check calling and check raising ace 5 here, or ace 10 or whatever. I mean, any ace really. I think there's merits to check calling or check raising any ace here. So I would expect a slower action on the turn. I didn't really see one, so that probably is what convinced me that I can value bet here and hope to get called by sixes or a worse 7. I mean, I do represent a missed flush draw pretty well, but at the same time, I have an extremely wide value range here already, given that I'm already value betting any ace and probably 8s. Well, certainly 10s are better. Maybe 8s are better. I mean, he can have 8s or 9s given his 3-bet percentage. 0. I guess he could also have jacks, but I don't expect that to hold up. I expect him to 3-bet some hands. So, I think that my value bet here is pretty good. Because of, like I said, I can sort of rule out an ace because, for one, he didn't check raise at some point, and secondly, because he didn't seem to think about check raising at some point. But also, he can certainly have 8s or 9s here, and he can also have king 7. But I think it's going to be pretty tough for, I saw him make that call earlier with 4s, which is probably what convinced me that he was a big enough station to call here with worse. So I think that my bet is good. And, I mean, I don't end up getting a call, and I wish I could see what he folded, but unfortunately I can't. But I certainly think that was a close spot. It's really interesting once I decide to c-bet the flop. But as I'm, as I get shallower, I start to c-bet a bit thinner, for value, for protection, and whatnot, so. I think a7, I don't know. Against a 3x from him, with a 60% button raise, I should probably be folding. And this is his first c-bet, so it's just a really easy fold. His sizing, his timing, the fact that I mean, there's just like a million different things telegraphing the strength of his hand there, in my opinion. Or, I shouldn't say his hand, but his range. Certainly he could have a bluff, but usually he won't. Usually he'll just have it. By the way, if you do watch this video, not you, the person who's watching, but you, my opponent, I apologize for acting so slow, but I must have been playing other tables or something, but I don't usually, when I'm one-tabling, I don't usually have my mouse off screen, timing down to the 15-second mark pretty much every single hand. So, sorry about that. Here, I don't know. For the reasons I've stated before, I think I have a pretty standard hand to check down. I don't really feel the need to c-bet marginal showdown hands against him, because I think he'll just let me see a showdown when I'm good. You'll notice that I went back to 2.5x. I guess I realized. Oh. Shout out to one of the other HUSNG.com coaches, Mercenary. I guess I was definitely playing other tables, obviously, since that popped up. That's a flashback to when he used to sit the 88s, back when he was a low-stakes nit, not balling out at high stakes like he is now. So you'll notice that my opponent is still 3xing. I think that's okay because I've been calling a lot, but I don't think it's great because we're really starting to get shallow here. And I think that it's really optimistic to think that I'm not going to start 3-betting him more. Anyways, we get his second c-bet here, but I'm certainly not going to fold a hand this strong to a c-bet. It's possible that he's just, started paying more attention or decided to take on a more aggressive approach, shifting gears a little bit or whatnot. On the turn here, I don't expect him really to ever bluff. I think it's a terrible spot to bluff, and I don't think I would expect any standard regular to bluff there on the turn. And if I check the river again, I don't think he bluffs either. Because really, when I check call the flop, combine the fact that he rarely c-bets with the fact that this board is dry as ever, and I don't think I ever really have a hand without showdown value here. I pretty much always have ace high or a pair. And for that reason, I think that if I check twice here, he's just going to check down the majority of his range unless he's beating me. So I think it makes sense for me to lead here. Hope to get called by worse full houses and also ace highs. And like I said earlier, I saw him call in a similar spot with fours, so when it's pretty hard for me to be bluffing. I don't think I would ever be bluffing here. Don't tell him that, but again, I think his call is bad. So here we get his first 3-bet. Obviously, I'm not calling. I would call with a very tight range there, but not extraordinarily tight, because I do think that he's shown to amp up his aggression a bit so far. So here we get his third consecutive c-bet, and I'm in a pretty tricky spot. First of all, despite seeing him c-bet the last 3 hands, we have no history that implies that he's going to run multiple barrel bluffs. And we saw him c-bet ace high on 8-8-2 rainbow, which is a pretty showdownable hand, but he chose to c-bet it anyways. So it wouldn't surprise me if he c-bet something like 6s or 5x, or even worse here. And the fact that he started c-betting more really should make me more inclined to bluff him here. So that combined with the fact that stacks are getting pretty shallow, I think this is a good check raise. I think that check calling here just lets him lets him realize too much equity when he has draws, and it lets him, check back a 5 on the turn or whatever. You could also argue to check call and lead some turns, but that's not really something that I do all that much, and I'm sort of getting used to implementing that into my game. But, in this particular spot, I just think that it's a good time for me to be bluffing, so if he realizes that, it will also make it a good spot for me to be value betting. So here is the part that I really hated in this hand, and honestly, it's really difficult for me to make a good decision here. Because, there's just a lot of reasons. First of all, he hasn't shown to be particularly creative. I gave him a pretty good price when I check raised here. I made it pretty small. So I don't think that if he had a good draw, he would make a small 3-bet with it. Unless he has like the nut draw or something and he's trying to induce. If he had like ace-5 of diamonds or like ace-4 of diamonds, ace-2 of diamonds, whatever. If he had a nutted draw like that, then he could definitely play it this way. But the majority of the time, I think he's playing a value hand this way. A value hand or like a complete total airball. But, just given the way that he's been playing, I expect it to be the former the vast majority of the time. But I put myself in a pretty difficult spot here by check raising a medium top pair, because I don't think, he could occasionally have worse for value here. He could be 3-betting something like 9-8 or 9-7. But we started the hand above 50 big blinds, and he's been reasonably passive against me throughout the entire match. So I really hated the spot I got into, and it sort of made me regret check raising, but I think that's sort of results biased. Because I think that a lot of the stuff that I said was true. I think if he had a 5 or 6s or a draw here, he would peel, and that's really what I want. Because it gives me, it just makes the hand play out much more in my favor, when like the majority of the time that he has a worse hand, he continues with it, and he takes a passive line with it, so I can sort of decide myself, what turns I want to bet, what turns I want to get the money in on. But I happened to get 3-bet this time, which really sucks, because I had no idea what to do against it. But basically for the sake of not being a huge nit, and also for the sake of like me possibly playing this guy more in the future, I decided to just get it in here. And, hopefully see like a nutted draw or a worse 9, which are plausible, but I think are a pretty small part of his range. I say this somewhat after the fact because I know what he had, but really if you piece together the way he's been playing throughout this match, I think that, like, the majority of the time he's not capable of value betting a worse hand here. So I sort of regret shoving there, and I think that it's probably a fold. But, anyways, I ended up getting it in, and I lost. So I'm just going to have to deal with that, I guess, and that'll be the way that I'll end this video and this series. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my first series here. I would appreciate if you left me some comments about, the general style of these videos. Make sure and tell me, if what I'm presenting is clear, and if you have any other questions, because I do, hope to make more videos in the future. I'm not sure when. I don't know what RyPack has planned for you guys at this time, but if there's anything you guys would like to see from me, if there's anything you would like to see me, put out sort of the same material or older material, or it's not older material, but related material, and if you would like to see something completely new, like HeadsUp Cash videos, transition, from sit and go to cash, something like that, more against regs, more against fish, these are all things you can leave in the comment box that would really help, us figure out if I'm going to start making more stuff for you guys soon. So anyways, that's all I have for now. And this has been Bear Wire for HUSNG.com. Good luck at the tables.